just to emphasize how these different sensors that Mohammed has gone through, GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, accelerometer, compass, gyroscope, orientation, gravity, linear acceleration, while they may seem a solitudes and a world away from health issues, let's consider a couple of them, right? One of the very frequent needs for almost any study is to know, for given periods of time, is the phone even being carried or not? You know, if we can have all the richest data in the world from many sensors, GPS information, from information having to do with accelerometry, information having to do with pressure, temperature, humidity, information having to do with Bluetooth. But if that phone isn't being carried on a person, if it isn't actually on their person, we don't know that it represents something meaningful for them, for the participant. And if we want to know that, one of the first things we want to know is, are they carrying it? Well, it turns out that accelerometer, gyroscope, orientation can all be really good clues. If the phone is dead flat, if it's not moving around, if it's just in some fixed pose, becomes a pretty clear sign that it's likely not on their person. If we want to understand something about whether they're in a vehicle or not, for example, look at a combination of accelerometer and GPS speed, for example. Potentially gyroscope could clue you in. If we want to know if they're indoors or outdoors, Wi-Fi and GPS. If Wi-Fi signal strength is strong and GPS is weak or non-existent, that may be a clue that they're inside versus outside, where GPS may be quite a bit more accurate. In short, while these may seem very geekish and technical, they actually provide really important clues for health contexts and health behaviors that can be of great significance. And needless to say, recognizing sedentary behavior or a level of physical activity, we can do a lot better because of this. Recognizing if someone's sitting, standing, lying down, clues from orientation of the phone, clues from accelerometry can really give us a good sense of their posture. Really important things for understanding some types of health outcomes and health exposures, and those insights arise from these very geeky data streams. Typically, it's not the sort of thing that you folks, as attendees, would have to deal with as health scientists, but it's the sort of thing that we specialize in to try to devise algorithms that would accurately classify these measures, and that could provide you with the high-level classifications you need to do your work, to censor the data according to when the phone's not even being captured, to know how much exposure someone has to sitting versus standing, to indoor versus outdoor environments, etc.
Yeah.
So they can be very useful.
Yeah, and the rest of the sensors, the first 6, as they mentioned, we use all these 6 to write classifiers that basically listens to the changes of the phone, and based on the changes it says, oh, now I know that the phone, this much pressure is applied to the phone and it's moving in this orientation, so it's very likely this is walking, or this is running, or this is in any other form. And that's actually that's actually how almost all the smartwatches out there that trace activity work. Like if you look at Fitbit, or if you look at Jawbones or all the other smartwatches out there, you will definitely see them talking about whether it has an accelerometer, gyroscope, compass, and so on. And if they say these things, they use these things for basically figuring out the movement using the data that they read from it. Now, the remaining ones, the proximity and, for example, I will go through through them one by one. They are mostly used to have some clue about the state of the phone. For example, the proximity is actually put into phone to detect when the person is talking over the phone. So the purpose was that if the person is talking with the phone, you want to turn off the phone so you prevent any accidental touch of the skin of their cheeks, the skin with the screen. Now, measuring that, you can have a good estimate of how long the person is spending talking over the phone without really having access to too much sensitive information. Because if you actually try to access the exact numbers that they have dialed and how long they have talked, That's a lot more detailed information, of course, but at the same level, you have a lot more sensitive data to deal with. You have harder to justify it. While one shortcut for that is to just use proximity sensor. The proximity sensor is located right here, and its purpose is to show it's a binary data usually. It says whether the phone is held next to the ear or it's not held next to the ear. And if it's held next to the ear, there is of course an error associated to that. Maybe my hand is here, it's not my ear, but it's very unlikely. 95% of the time probably, if the phone is covered and proximity sensor says an object is less than 1 centimeter away, very likely the person is talking over the phone.
So one comment and one question here, Mohammed. So the comment is, we have to be a bit cautious because sometimes in our circle we'll use proximity to mean inter-individual proximity versus proximity in the sense of the sensor. And here we're talking about proximity, very physical, short distance proximity to a surface.
Proximity sensor, in fact, either uses a dedicated sensor, uses light, or uses light, and its only purpose is to measure if there is an object in a very close proximity to the phone or not.
So if
the output is binary, it says yes, there's an object close to the phone. No, it's not.
So if it's in your pocket, would
no, it doesn't. If the screen is off,
yes,
that doesn't work.
Okay, but it's only if it's on and in your pocket.
I believe so. Yeah. And again, like similar to other things in Android, every company produces their own thing. So you kind of need to have a sense of exactly what kind of phone they were carrying as well to be able to say that, oh, if it's that kind of phone, so probably that's how it works. A better indication is light, which is the first environmental sensor. And light, probably Nate talked about it a bit about how we can use light to figure out whether the person is indoor and outdoor. The sensor itself does something simple. It just measures the amount of ambient light, and it's there so it can adjust it's there so it can adjust the brightness of the screen. But turns out that the ambient light outside in a sunny environment is a lot more than ambient light that you receive indoors, even if it's a lot of lights on. So even if you turn on like 20 lights here, still the light that you get in a sunny day outside is going to be multiple order of magnitude more than the light that you get inside. And that creates a very good indication of the person being outside. Now the assumption here is that the person is outside and it's a sunny day, which might not be 100% of the time, it's definitely not.
Although you can cross-link it with weather.
Yes, you can cross-link it with weather, but the thing is that if you see the ambient light received by the sensor is more than, say, for example, a 13,000 mark, you can fairly say that we are very sure the person is outside, because it's impossible to get that much ambient light inside in any circumstance. Now, if it's not at that mark, we can't say anything about it. Maybe it's sunny, maybe it's not sunny, maybe it's cloudy, maybe the person is indoors, or anything.
Maybe it's after dark.
Maybe it's the dark hours, yes. Well, for the dark hours, you have to get the hours, so exactly. you can exactly check it. Exactly. But if it's during the day and you don't get that limit, you can't say anything. You have to look at other sources of data.
And again,
if it's in your pocket, again, yeah. If it's in your pocket, it unfortunately, again, doesn't show that.
Yeah, which is something that accelerometry and pose of the phone may clue you into, the gyroscope. Another issue with light, though, which also bears, if you're interested in mental health issues, sleep schedule, and so on, if the phone in the middle of the night, for example, detects light being on in a strong way, that also could be a clue as to disrupted sleep cycles, which are of strong interest to certain researchers.
And some of the smartwatches also start to be released with probably soon we will see the smartwatches that are released with the light sensor to adjust their brightness. And then the advantage of smartwatches over the phones is that honestly, most of them have the same type of sensors. Like they have, like if you check the smartwatch, they also talk about almost the same type of sensors. The advantage is that the usage of a watch is very different than the usage of a phone. The watch is always on your wrist. It's not in your pocket or backpack or home or your desk or something, while the phone can be anywhere. That's why there's a lot more definite conclusions you can make about watch that you can't make about the phone.
It's a very controlled environment. If you measure accelerometry, you know accelerometry of your wrist,
exactly,
etc., which is of great significance.
Yeah. And the same with battery. Nate showed a few examples of the battery. That's another source of data that we monitor. And one of the advantages of that is that it shows how much battery we are using. So if a participant comes to us and say, you know what, it's your phone that it drains, it's your app that drains our battery, we say, no, we know that's not our app, it's the other app that you're running to play. So that's for our own sake. But beyond that, there is some good information you can get from it. And this good information comes from the fact that the sensor, the source of data is very reliable. Like it gives you a very definite answer that there is no different way to interpret it. So if it tells you how the phone is plugged, if it's plugged or unplugged or USB plugged or AC plugged and so on. And if it says it's unplugged, you can't interpret it in any other form, it's unplugged. Or if it's wall plugged to the wall, it's definitely plugged to the wall. It says it's charging or discharging and the battery percentage. The advantage here that we have is that, this can be a source of data that can help to figure out the state of the phone right now. Like if the phone is right now plugged to the wall, we can be sure that the person is not having the phone with them walking or running. So any other data we read from this, for example, 6 activity-related data is irrelevant because the phone is plugged to the wall. How much you can be active is your phone is plugged, right? The same, if it's plugged to the USB, is a bit trickier. Maybe you have a power bank. There's these tiny power banks that's in your pocket and you're running because you want to charge your phone as well. If it's unplugged, same. You probably can't say much about it. But this is some source of data that's very easy to interpret and it's very clear. There's no noise associated with it.
And for including you in that you're very likely to be indoors.
Yeah.
With machine learning algorithms, this provides significant confidence that you're likely to be in an environmental controlled environment. In other words, indoors.
Yeah.
It could be a car, but it could be indoor. It's more likely to be indoor a building.
It's either inside a car, and even not even a car. If a car has a plug, and not many cars have a plug that their source of power is taken as AC source. So very few cars, and then you will have a GPS data that clearly shows you're in a car, right?
Exactly.
But if you as you mentioned, except that one exception being a car that has an AC that then you probably are moving, then you can be guaranteed that you are inside the building.
And again, this brings home my point earlier about the importance of variety, because this answer by itself might be ambiguous, but once you combine it with GPS speed, and once you combine it with aspects, other clues as to the vehicular environment, like the fact there's no Wi-Fi around, and so on, it starts to clue you into, okay, you are almost certainly in a vehicle versus in a building, given how it's plugged in.
Yeah. The other one is my favorite, is the screen state. The reason it's my favorite is that you don't need any permission to read this in phones. Well, no one cares about it. And really, people are not that sensitive about it. They don't care if you know what is the state of their screen, if it's on or off. But you actually can extract a lot from it. One of the things is that depending on how on, first I have to say what it detects. It actually detects when the screen turns on and when it turns off. So it records a series of events. Now, a screen turned on, screen turned off, screen turned on, and screen turned off. So you can figure out how long they use their phone, with what frequency and what duration they use their phone. That gives a very clear indication of their phone usage habits, and it's very easy to calculate this. Another one that I think for most of the people, maybe not for 100% of people, but for most people we can extract from this is their sleep pattern. Because many people tend to set the alarm clock on their phone and go to sleep. And then that's the first thing they check when they wake up. And so if you actually look at their screen state pattern, you can see that there is checking phone every half an hour, sometimes every 5 minutes, and then there is a gap of 7 to 9 hours that nothing happens. And then again, same sequence starts. And that clearly shows that exactly from what time they went to sleep, what time they woke up. Now, it might not be 100% true for some people, maybe have different sleeping habits, but...
and along these lines, it's an immediate clue as to whether the phone is on person. If it's on, they almost certainly are with the phone.
Yeah.
More than that, it can also provide you with clues as to whether the phone is likely to be the user is likely to be amenable to having a question answered right now. So if the phone screen state is on and they're using it, it might not be a bad time to consider issuing a questionnaire because they probably get it immediately and could answer it immediately.
That can be, yes. Well, I'll explain that how we can use each of these sources of data. In the I actually included the survey as the very last one, because then I can say how we can use each of this data as an indicator to trigger a survey. But anyway, yeah. One of the things that I've seen is that, well, I sometimes peek into this data is that some people, when you look at their phone usage pattern through 24 hours, there is not any 6-hour period that the phone is not turned on. And like you can't find any 6-hour period that the phone is not turned on. That just shows one thing, that probably at some point at night they woke up and turned on the phone. Because otherwise, well, what else you might have to get this data? So it also shows that like whether they well, I actually had seen patterns that, for example, the phone was almost off for 8 hours, but it was turned on every 2-3 hours during that day, that 8 hours. So probably the person wasn't sleeping very deep that night because it was waking up, checking the phone, turning it off again, going to sleep.
It's a really useful extreme, isn't it?
Yeah, as I said, it's my favorite because no one cares about it, but you can actually infer a lot from it.
And this whole question around screen time and impacts of screen time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask a naive question though. Are there certain apps that will trigger the screen going on even though no one's interacted with the phone, or is that not the case?
No, it's not. They can't do that.
Okay.
Yeah. They can send it to a state called daydreaming, that the phone just turns on and just shows something like you received an email, but that doesn't trigger this event. It has to be turned on by the user.
By the user.
Of
Yeah.
course, you don't know what they're looking at. You don't know what apps they're accessing.
That's a separate one. No, we don't know anything
What app
about that.
usage, you do know.
Yeah.
So you can cross-link that with, for example, if they're on Facebook or if they're tweeting.
No, again, because the way that we get app usage, but
Sorry,
is the next one is app usage? Yes. So it's actually a good question. So we don't know what app they're using, but there is another source, the next one, app usage, which tells us what app we're using. Now, this is a very sensitive one, and there's a lot of changes has gone into this. iOS, because of the Apple, because of their perspective about privacy, upfront they said that it's not possible. So I'm not sure if there is any way that we can get this data. So far, we haven't found a way, and that's one of the things that I said. Android and iOS is going to be slightly different, at least at this stage that we're still working on development iOS, is that many of these data are very sensitive data, like web browse or app usage statistics and so on. And so, Apple's perspective on this has been very different than Google. They clearly said that it's not possible to do it, and if you try to trick us, we kick your app out of App Store and we never let you back in. They clearly said that. So it's funny, but that's what they do. So we provide all of these on Android, and now we are trying to figure out which of them is possible even to do in iOS and which of them is not possible to do.
So does it get the foreground app
At
at the time it's pulled?
Which one, iOS or?
No, well, on
in
Google.
general.
On
Google,
on Android.
On Android phones, app usage started by telling you what app is being foreground anytime you asked for.
Right.
So basically, at any moment, you could know when the app was there. That was 2.5 years ago. They figured out that that's very, very intrusive. You should not do that. So they changed it. The new one tells you the statistics about how the apps are used. What that means is that at the end of the 24-hour period, you can query the apps that are used in that 24 hours, and it tells you how long those apps were used. So it doesn't tell you when they were used, but it tells you, for example, Facebook was used 1.5 hours for the past one day. Instagram was used that, and so on.
And it's not rolling.
It's not. You mean accumulating?
It's not rolling 24 hours in the past, because you can
No.
Yeah.
So basically, the
look
way
at
that
which one's increasing. You know.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No. They know that they have stopped.
Yeah,
all
I know
this.
they're pretty smart.
Yeah. So the way that we collect this data is that at every midnight, we query the apps that were used in the past 24 hours, and we record them, that how often they were used. So to answer your question, unfortunately, no, we can't associate any of those to any specific screen being turned on event. Because we don't know exactly when they were used. We only know how long that specific app was used.
That's useful. I mean, I'm thinking, because there's a study that we've been trying to get going around the role of social media and internet use in modifying standard risk factors for suicidal behaviour. Right, so people sort of say, you know what, it's the internet, it creates contagion, it's a terrible thing, but on the other hand, some people say, no, it connects people, and it actually is very good.
It's very good that you mentioned that. So there are two anecdotes I want to mention. Like, we are running right now a study with the geography department that they were interested to measure the physical activity outdoors in summer. Now, at the same time, Pokemon Go was issued, which was a great changer in people's behavior. Now, one of the things that we were talking with Kevin Stanley, he mentioned that if it's possible to actually measure how Pokemon Go is, how long Pokemon Go is used. And this was actually when the study was already rolled out. So we were discussing whether it's possible to add this stream while the study is live and then start going with that. They start capturing the data. Now, there are multiple challenges there. First, we have to update the ethics application. That takes time. Then you have to ask people. Then you have to give them the option that whether they should opt in or not. And that adds a lot of challenges. So what we decided was to just look at the period of time that the GPS is continuously being recorded and the battery goes down very fast. Because that's a very intense phone, so it drains the battery a lot. GPS is running, so one thing is that if any other app is using GPS, our app gets a copy of that and saves it. So I should explain this a bit, probably maybe it's helpful. So the way that it works is that if your participation period is, like, for example, 7 days, we collected it in 5 minutes, another 5 minutes, another 5 minutes, another 5 minutes, because this is periodically we collect GPS data. Unless you, for example, are navigating somewhere and open your map and start navigating to, for example, somewhere in downtown. And then during that time, during that 1 hour period, your GPS is constantly working. Why? Because you want to find your way to navigate, right? So our app during this 1 hour period collects the GPS, it gets a copy of the GPS data that was collected for maps. We just eavesdrop that data. And so we thought that instead of using the app usage data, we can just check the parts that are blocks of data that we get continuous GPS collection. That's an indication that some app is constantly requesting GPS. And if the battery is going down as well, and the screen is on as well, they're probably playing some apps in their phone about GPS.
Does Ethica constantly monitor the GPS, or it just goes?
No, if some other apps, like Maps or any other app, asks for GPS, we get a copy of the location that they have requested. That's how it works. That's why, for example, my phone detects GPS locations every 5 minutes, unless I start my navigation to go, for example, to downtown, and then I have to drive for 1 hour. During that 1 hour, Ethica collects continuous GPS data.
And then you can cross-link it to motor vehicle traffic incidents for Pokemon Go. Have you seen this in Canada? There have been
Really
2 instances of, in Australia. In Victoria, they're now putting up traffic warnings, and as you're driving on, do not Pokemon Go and drive. After one guy crashed into someone's front.
I saw the video in Central. I saw the video
driving and trying to catch.
I saw that video in Central Park. That apparently they put a very unique Pokemon Go Pokemon there, and everyone just rushed there, and the whole street was blocked in New York. And I see it on a daily basis in the park in front of our house. Like, people are, no one was there.
Campus up by the administration building and the McKinnon building. These people are like at 9 o'clock at night, 8:30. There's lots of people congregating. And we added to that study, we had a component for mosquito exposure because there's a lot of extra mosquito exposure going on. We're asking about personal protective behavior, etc.
Yeah. So that was one thing. So you don't really need the app data to figure out some apps running. But of course, Pokemon Go is a special case. We can't really go with that for all of them. But there's another source of data to get, another source that you can get data from the apps, and it's by communicating with the app directly. Almost all of these apps provide an API, basically allowing other apps to work with them.
It's called an application programming interface.
Yes. So you can, for example, if you want to get data from Facebook, you can use the programming interface that Facebook has, and based on that, exactly collect the communications that the person had over Facebook. You have seen probably some apps if you're using Facebook, some apps saying that Facebook sometimes saying that this app is trying to access your data because of this and this purpose, whether you allow it or not. You can use the same interface. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, almost all apps have this. And then if the participant allows you to have access to those data, then you can have access to exact content that they are sharing, and not only the duration or other high-level information.
Does that include incoming tweets as well?
They define different permissions over that. Like they define permissions. Like Facebook has a very detailed permission model based on like you can access email, you can post, you can read other posts, you can do this, do that, and so on. Twitter as well. You can read the tweets, set tweets, and so on.
So have you used that function in Ethica?
We are working with one group. It hasn't been finalized yet. We are working with a group in France that they are interested to use. Facebook has an application called Moves. That their purpose is actually just it records location data and it breaks it into events throughout the day. And they were very interested into that data. Now we are working with that group to add the interface from our app to Facebook's Moves app, and then read that data and then collect the diary of places visited by a person throughout the day, based on the data that we get from that.
The potential is just mind-blowing.
Well, there's a lot of things that you can do. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do. And these ones, one thing I should mention is that these ones are actually not. So the first, how many? I can't really count. Up to screen state, down to here, down to screen state, down to here. These are part of the Ethica primary app. So if you install app, the app can configure itself to collect this data. But the last three, except surveys, the app usage, browsing history, and Empathical Watch, these are released as a plugin. What the plugin means is that it's not part of the app, but the app recognizes those things. And if you actually register in a study that requires any of those sources of data, it instructs participants how to download that plugin to join. What that means is that we can create more streams, like whether the stream to collect, to talk to Facebook, to talk to anything else, or to talk to, I don't know, maybe a bathroom scale that is just newly introduced and we never thought about it. We can write a stream that actually can talk to the bathroom scale and get the data sources from there. So these three are examples of how these data sources can be expanded. I'm going to quickly go through web browsing and the watch as well. Web browsing basically just monitors all the URLs that you have visited in Firefox and some versions of Chrome as part of the websites that you have visited. It's not part of the main app. You have to install a separate application for that to work. It's like a plugin format. An Empathical Watch is a watch. Unfortunately, I don't think if you have any of them here, but it's very much looks like this one. It has some specialized sensors. Many of them I'm honestly personally not familiar with. Like for example, accelerometer is of course very clear, but blood volume pulse or galvanic skin response sensor that you can collect from that. The app Ethica just basically acts as a data tunnel that collects data from Empathica and uploads them. Okay. So the last one is surveys. I kept the surveys the last one is that because I think that there are let me get the time as well. Yep. Okay, we have a bit of time to talk about surveys. Now there are a lot of survey apps out there, and Nate mentioned about so most of them are very generic. You can get an online survey form like SurveyMonkey and those ones that you can fill surveys. There are a lot of EMAs applications out there that you can trigger these ecological momentary assessments. They usually have a context that you can define to based on that context to issue the survey. For example, time, like 3 times throughout the day or 5 times a day, or there are some of the more complicated ones as well based on GPS. It's the only one I'm aware of. You can say if the GPS is, like for example, if the person is in this location, trigger the survey and so on. But the way that we have designed a survey that's different is that basically you can use any of these sensors that are mentioned above or any of these sources of data as an event to, as a reason to trigger a survey. Like for example, you can trigger a survey when the phone is connected to battery, connected to the charger, or when the person, as Nate mentioned, you can release a survey when the person actually turns on the screen, or any other combination of these sensors that you can get. We also customize these sensors for the research studies. Like, there are some that we realize that are, well, working with these teams. Of course, we didn't know up front. We didn't have any of these. But working with some of the research groups, we found out there are some generic, some survey types that were very helpful. One of them is eligibility survey. Eligibility survey is actually triggered as soon as you try to join the study. When you enter that code and you say okay, it starts asking you multiple questions, and based on your responses to those questions, it either decides whether you are eligible or not eligible to join the study. And based on that, it either lets you to read the consent form and join, or it says sorry, you are not eligible, and you cannot sign in. The other one is pre-study survey, which basically is a baseline survey. It just, it's the same as like asking a few demographic questions. So it asks these questions from participants as soon as they sign up for the study. So they are eligible, they read the consent materials, they sign in, they register in the study. Immediately after, they are presented with these questions, and the app makes sure that they only answer this once and for sure once. So it keeps beeping them until they answer it at least once, or they answer it once. The next one is post-study survey, the questions that you might want to ask towards the end of the study as part of the end of their participation. The next one is exit or dropout survey. People can leave a study for any reason if they decide to. We thought that it's very helpful to know why they are leaving a study, and if you think it fits the study design, like it can be valuable to ask a few questions if they decide to drop out. You can define a survey and set it as exit survey. So basically, if they decide to leave the study, they will be asked those questions. And the last one is generic survey. Generic survey is basically a survey that you can ask at any time. It's like the EMA surveys that you can ask once, multiple times, or in any other format. Now, for generic survey, you can, where I have defined this. Yeah, you can have different criteria like time, location, contact pattern, other survey responses. For example, you can say that if the participant answered the survey response in a specific way, then ask this other question. Or if the participant answered this survey, I don't know, in a very, like if they said yes or no to this, answer this or the other question. The way that we have done the survey, and that's an odd choice, it's hard to explain, but that's the best way that we have been able to design it, is we have, for every, usually surveys refers to a set of questions that you ask. Like you have this, if this is a survey, usually you have like, I don't know, 5 or 6 questions, question 1, question 2, and so on, and you ask them as part of the survey. But we changed the survey a bit, and we had to change the terminology a bit as well. If you have any comment or any feedback how we can improve it, please, we would love to know. But the way that we changed it is that a survey is actually a collection of questionnaires. Like for example, this can be questionnaire 1, and questionnaire 2, questionnaire 3, and so on. Each of these questionnaires are a set of questions that you can ask independently as a session, and they have nothing to do with the remaining. And they also can have a logic. This logic decides which of these surveys have to be issued. So basically, you can define a survey that has 3 independent questionnaires and a logic, and say that then if participant goes to a location, that location is a park, ask them this one. If they go to a place that the place is, for example, a restaurant, ask them this one. And if they go to a place that's place, for example, is, for example, indoor physical activity place, ask them this one. So the idea was that you have one logic that decides what questions has to be, that analyzes this data that you get from these sources, and based on these data, decides what questions it has to ask. Now you can have as many of these as you want in your study. You can have like 5 or 6 or 7 or as many. Like for example, in one of the studies we have, I think if I want to give you a real study example, is that for one of the studies we have 5 of it, and the way that we have divided it is that if a participant is a smoker, like for example, one survey is only for smokers. And then the smoker survey has 3 questionnaires. And the way that they wanted to do it is that people get 4 surveys a day unless they are in a period called intense week. Intense week, they get 8 surveys per day for a different purpose. So you check, you say if they are a smoker, then there is a logic. That logic says that if you are in intense week, issue this questionnaire. If you are not in intense week, issue this questionnaire. Or another example is that they want, for example, say, if you are visiting a new location, ask them, and the location is an indoor physical activity place, ask them this questionnaire. That's another work that we're doing with a group in Michigan. If it's a indoor physical activity activity place, ask them this questionnaire. If it's not, ask them, if it's a park, ask them the second set of questions.
Is there any limit on the length of questions that you can?
No, it can be as many. So the only difference between our survey and any other survey system that you have seen out there is that our survey is not a set of questions, but our survey is a set of questionnaires that the questionnaires each own the questions. And then you can have a logic with a survey that says which questionnaire has to be issued at any time. Now, to a large extent, they have tried to have a UI for that, to specify it. So you don't really have to deal with with coding it. But actually, this logic, there are 2 ways to define this logic. This can be something simple that you can type it down, like a one-liner, for example, something like fixed time, April 15th, 2017 at 5 p.m. If you write like this as a logic, it says that issue this questionnaire only once at April 15th at 5 p.m. Done. That's a very simple one. Or it can be very complicated. If it wants to get complicated, you can write some small pieces of code that basically the job of that code is to go through this data, analyze it based on the way that we need it, and decide whether it has to issue a survey or not. So I talked a lot, sorry, but I hope it made it was helpful. So if there's any questions, I would love we can talk about it.
Yeah. Any questions that want to ask?
The surveys might seem a bit confusing. We will see more of it, how it works, and how what are the applications of it. While it might seem confusing at the beginning, it gives us a lot of flexibility in the way that we can combine these questionnaires that would not be possible in the traditional form. But I hope in the next few days it becomes even more clear that how the surveys work.
Yeah. So any questions people would like to ask right now regarding this system before we use, I guess what we should probably do is think about using remaining time for, what time is it now?
5. Close to 4.
Okay, yeah, so we're getting tight here. Yes, I'm.
The way the logic works, you said calculates the information from different sources and then triggers one of the questionnaires or something like that. So it's always active. I mean, it calculates all the time this data from the different sources and then
The way that the Android system works right now, and this is one of the things that Android and iOS is very different. So in iOS, the logic should stay on the server side because iOS does not allow such thing to happen. But Android does allow. So for iOS, we move it to the server side. That as soon as these data are uploaded to the server, it processes them and says, oh, actually their screen just turned on, so maybe we have to issue the survey. And it asks the app to set the survey.
So any change in the data?
Yes, any change of the data, but that change has to be uploaded to the server. What that means is that they only get those questionnaires if they are connected to the internet. That's what the iOS is, the iPhone. For Android, it's completely irrelevant. The way Android works is that Android guarantees that the data collected for past 1 hour is in the phone. So the logic that you have is executed every 5 minutes and evaluates the situation. And says, so did the screen turn on in the past 5 minutes? Did the user plug the phone to the battery in past 5 minutes? Did they use Facebook?
Did they arrive at this park?
Yeah, exactly. Did they arrive in this geofence that I have defined in the past 5 minutes? And if the answer is yes, it can ask the system to issue them one of the surveys that they have defined. Or like, did I visit a person? Like for example, one of the things that we have done is that with this team in Harvard is that the survey is like this, like it executes every 5 minutes and asks, am I visiting one of my team members? Because they actually have enrolled some participants and they're divided into teams, and says, have I visited any of my team members for the past 2 hours? If the answer is yes, then it uses the name of that team member and asks the person that, have you seen, for example, John recently? If yes, did you talk about smoking? If yes, what did you talk about, and so on.
Yeah. Where John is the name of that.
The name of John is the name of that person.
So they're using respondent-driven sampling and recruiting small networks, and that's referred to here as a team, but
yes.
it's not a team in a professional sense. Just a set of people that I know that have
it's
also
a social net.
that have also. So I'm the ego, and they're the alters
exactly.
within the context of the study. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Other questions?
For the time, is the time based on the device or the server?
The time is based on the device, but our assumption is that the time is valid. Now, if the time on the device is invalid, it can cause a lot of troubles.
Yeah.
But our assumption is that the time on the phone is valid. But it's mostly valid if the person is using the phone as their primary phone.
Yeah. One issue is that used to be a lot bigger of an issue when we were handing out phones and when the phones would be kept offline for a long time and they'd run out of battery.
Yeah.
And then because they run out of the internal battery, they had not powered in their internal clock, and so their clock gets screwed up. And until they connect with the network, particularly, it may be far off their time, and that could cause big problems.
Yes.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Okay.
You can pause this one, maybe.
Yeah. So let's stop that. And, okay. What I'm thinking is that, given the late time and the fact that we've had a very intense day, we should probably close for the day.
I agree.
And we'll continue tomorrow morning. Probably first thing we'll try creating some of the study. So
Aiden, your screen is.
Yeah, I just wanted to stop.
Okay, good.
okay, great. So thank you everyone for your thanks. Thank you everyone for your participation today.
It's easy to hear you without that.
Thank you very much for your participation today. It's been great to interact with you and talk about these issues. We'll start up tomorrow at 9 a.m. We'll have some more breakfast items. So if you'd like to eat breakfast here with some muffins and bagels and that sort of stuff, you're welcome to do so. And we'll get going with some study designs in the morning, and then we'll continue on a set of important topics, including discussion of including a demonstration of how to create the sort of questionnaires that Mohammed was talking about here, that make up these surveys. And we'll be identifying triggering needs tomorrow. We'll also be looking at adapting for your particular studies the various types of questions, informational items and multiple choice and option selects and audio and picture, etc. That will be applicable for your studies. Okay, that will be tomorrow. We'll also be talking about aspects of study design that we haven't had a chance to cover today. So a lot of material tomorrow, both practical, hands-on, and in terms of some of the specifics of the concepts and applying those concepts to your area. So that's all today. Thank you very much for your patience. I think Andrew and I are probably feeling similarly, incomparably right now for different reasons. But look forward to seeing you at 9 a.m. or if you want to get here, we'll be here. We should be mostly here by 8:30 for sure, and perhaps possibly a bit more if you'd like to talk. Okay. So that's tomorrow morning, same place. Thanks everyone for your patience. And
shall we keep the mobile?
That's a good question.
Do we use it for recharging?
I would say yes. If you have a way of recharging it, keep it with you. If you have a way of charging it at home. If you don't have a way of charging it, leave it here, and we'll see what we can do about getting it charged. Okay. And you could claim it tomorrow. This room will be locked. I have the keys now, and so if you want to leave things here, incidentals and so on, you're welcome to do so. And we'll see you tomorrow morning. There's plenty of leftover items out there, some donut holes and coffee. And if people would like to take anything, you're welcome to do so. And I include most notably the graduate students in my comments there. Very good. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Hey.
That's great. Thanks.
Great.
It's
Terrific to have you here.
Potential is never going to use a paper questionnaire again. It's really one of those moments of seeing how useful this could be, isn't it?
Well, once the iPhone version, now that the iPhone version is out, I should say, it really has a lot of potential. There are occasional times where a web-based questionnaire to complement this, like maybe before people download the app, it's useful. And this is something Mohammed has spent a lot of time thinking about, is what goes on mobile versus what goes on the web. Because particularly there's a question, to what degree for eligibility, or to what degree for some baseline stuff, do you want them to actually download the app if it turns out that it's not needed?
Yeah.
And so there's some uncertainties there, but yeah, I have to say, doing the paper questionnaire comes, it comes with some encumbrances, there's no question that this can avoid, so, yeah.
So at some stage as well, it'd be good to catch up about various things as well.
Totally agree. And are you here Friday?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've set aside a lot of Friday to be able to talk, but it would be great to be able to talk additionally in the next few days as time allows.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and even over lunch,
Yeah.
we could even hive off to one of the small tables there if we wanted to do that.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
No worries.
Okay,
Thanks,
thanks a ton. Yeah,
What should we do for the charge?
I have one here. So I'd be glad to plug it in here. Are these phones? And that was one that someone returned? Yeah. Who is that? Oh, yeah. How? Okay, so we'll try to charge that up. So should I pull out my charger to get it charging?
This person this way for that person that way. It's for people
How are you doing?
who are
let's say for people who are, for example, of football and because
Yeah,
they-
I think all the videos are now, with the exception of this last one, are now posted. Let me,
That's what you mean the
Same
Muhammad
person?
one?
well, yeah, on these,
Yes.
on these
When-
sense